Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Summer Meals, Mitigating the Impact of the Loss of the Summer Nutrition Waivers. My name is Kelsey Boone, and I am a Child Nutrition Policy Analyst with FRAC. Over the course of this webinar, feel free to use the Q&A function to ask our panelists questions. USDA will not be answering live questions. However, they will be answering those that were submitted before the webinar. All other panelists will answer questions during a short Q&A at the end of the session. We will be recording this webinar and sending out the recording and the slides in a follow-up in the next week. So as I'm sure you're all aware, we are heading into yet another difficult summer full of new challenges when it comes to summer meal operations. Today's speakers will give a lot of information on how your states, advocates, sponsors, and sites can address some of these challenges. We will begin with an update from USDA on the summer waivers and go into a Q&A session for them. After this, we will hear from Walter Campbell, Executive Director of Nutrition Services at Charleston County Schools, followed by Devin Schroeder, Senior Manager of Programs at Hunger Free Oklahoma, and finally from Asaid Perrin Monterosso, Nutrition Program Outreach Coordinator at the Rhode Island Department of Education. We will wrap up with a Q&A for these panelists. And now I'll turn it over to Anne from USDA for their update.
Thank you, Kelsey. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Anne Fiala, and I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Program and Policy Development Division in the Child Nutrition Programs. It's a bit of a mouthful. And before I begin, I just really want to express our sincere appreciation for each and every one of you, the state agencies, the sponsors, the program operators. You provided us a lot of feedback these past few months, and we wanted to let you know we heard you, we appreciate your insight, and we acknowledge that the downstream effects of COVID-19 are still happening and they're far from over, and we're working hard with you to try to smooth this transition as much as possible. So thank you. And with that, we can turn to the presentation, and we'll start off with waiver information for what's going to become available this coming summer. See if you could advance the slides. Oh, advance again. Thank you. One more. Yep, there we go. So as you all know, due to the pandemic in March of 2020, Congress first provided USDA with the authority to waive the statute and regulations for child nutrition programs through the Family First Coronavirus Response Act of 2020, which you might also hear called FCRA. And then later through the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2021 and other Extensions Act. And these two bills together allowed FNS to address the urgent need for nutrition assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic by giving USDA the authority to issue nationwide waivers. Now, these waivers allowed us to equip schools and other program operators with resources and operational flexibilities that they needed to serve kids through the pandemic. However, though, the emergency authority that allows USDA to offer these flexibilities expires at the end of this school year, and Congress did not extend USDA's waiver authority. So this means that USDA can no longer offer the full range of waivers that are currently available. FNS understands that program operators will still need certain flexibilities to run successful programs in summer 2022 and in the coming school year in 2022-2023. Therefore, we have identified several options within our normal program authorities that will be available for child nutrition program operators during these times of transition. And today we're happy to share the flexibilities that states may request for summer 2022. So if you could advance the slide, please. So looking first at 12L waiver authority. So even though USDA does not have nationwide waiver authority, states and sponsors can still submit individual waiver requests as needed. And these waivers can be granted through USDA's 12L authority. Section 12L, for those of you who are not familiar, is part of the National School Lunch Act, and it grants the Secretary of Agriculture the authority to waive program requirements under certain circumstances. Section 12L waiver authority can only be used for individual states or eligible service providers, so it's not nationwide like the authority we had for COVID. And state waiver requests under 12L have to meet certain conditions, which you can see on the screen. And those are that they have to support the purpose of the program, The state or entity that is requesting the waiver must provide notice and information to the public regarding what the purpose of that waiver is. And the request has to demonstrate that the waiver will not increase overall costs to the program or that the cost will be paid from non-federal funds. And then along with that, there are some things that Section 12L waivers cannot be used to waive. And these include the nutrition contents of meals and snacks, the federal reimbursement rates, or the provision of free and reduced priced meals. And those are the main ones. There are a couple other restrictions in there. So if you want to know more, we advise you to refer to the National School Lunch Act for more information. And through our 12L authority, we're planning to offer a variety of tools to help you manage the transition back to normal operations. You could go to the next slide, please. So even though we don't have nationwide waiver authority, FNS has already released guidance for 4 of the most popular waivers, which you might commonly know or hear people call the rescinded memo waivers. These are ones that we're able to approve through 12L authority, and they're waivers of first week site visit requirements, offer versus serve requirements, meal service times restrictions, and area eligibility for closed enrolled sites. And this is for Ssfsp and SSO operations this summer in 2022. So FNS has already processed and approved a whole bunch of these waivers that were submitted by state agencies. So sponsors and program operators should check with their state agency to see if their state has requested and received one of these common waivers for this summer. And so then along with these 4 waivers, states can still submit individual waiver requests through the traditional means because we have a streamlined process for these through the traditional waiver request method if needed. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so looking specifically at COVID-19 operational waivers. We know that summer 2020 is right around the corner. So for some of you, it may already be basically upon you. And many operators are anxious to know what operations will look like this year. We know that the meal service waivers have provided a lot of flexibility to operators throughout COVID, and many have advocated for these continued flexibilities through the summer. As you may know, non-congregate meal service and parent pickup of meals for SSO are already included in the nationwide SSO waivers that were issued last fall, and they are available through June 30th, 2022. However, though, we are excited to let you know that the Ssfsp and SSO non-congregate and parent pickup flexibilities may still be available in your states through the rest of the summer if requested by the state through an individual state waiver. So that's the 12Ls. USDA can approve these waivers through that authority. The operational waivers I'm talking about include non-congregate meal service, parent pickup, and meal service times. So states can choose to have a meal service time waiver in place in order to fully utilize these flexibilities. As I said, we've already approved a lot of those requests. 47 state agencies have already requested and been approved for a meal service times waiver for this summer through the rescinded memo waivers form that I talked about in the last slide. So therefore, this waiver is not included in the guidance for requesting additional waivers for this coming summer and school year. The meal service times waiver, along with the other summer rescinded waivers, expire April 30th, 2023. And it's important to note for non-congregate and parent pickup waivers, as well as many of the others that we're going to cover, FNS expects that flexibilities under these 2 will only be implemented by program operators when congregate meal service is limited by the COVID-19 pandemic. And once again, we strongly suggest that you check with your state agency to determine what waivers are going to be available in your state. So next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about waiver. Now that we've talked about waivers that are currently available, we have a few nationwide waivers that affect summer meals that have been discontinued because our authority to issue nationwide waivers in response to the COVID-19 pandemic has expired. and these waivers don't meet the requirements to be approved as additional waivers under 12L of the School Lunch Act. And they are area eligibility and waivers of meal pattern requirements. Now, we know that some of these waivers were key to your successful operations over the past few years. And while we're unable to continue these waivers, we are working really hard to come up with guidance and flexibilities, things that we can do that are within our authority to help program operators be successful as they transition back to more normal operations. So with that, let's talk about some other flexibilities for 2022. If you could advance the slide, please. Area eligibility. We know that this has been one of the nationwide waivers that state agencies valued for the administrative and operational efficiencies as it provided. However, as I just mentioned, the Secretary does not have the authority to waive certain requirements of the National School Lunch Act without additional action from Congress. This includes the provision of free and reduced price meals. And for this reason, we're not able to offer waivers of area eligibility for the coming summer. And we know that one of the main concerns with not having area eligibility waivers in place is that in some cases there may be no prior year school data in order to make eligibility determinations for new or renewing sites. And this includes sites in the Ssfsp and the SSO. To be clear though, SFAs that operated regular NSLP in school year 21-22, they should not have any issues with providing school data in order to make area eligibility determinations for programs in their area. However, we do know that many schools operated SSO and they didn't collect free and reduced price applications and instead, relied on serving free meals to all kids during COVID-19. And so for these schools, they don't have access to the students' individual free and reduced price eligibility information in order to make area eligibility determinations for students in summer 20 and in the coming school year in 22-23. Next slide, please. So we do have two options that are available to assist with this issue. And these two options for area eligibility data only apply to schools that operated SSO in this past school year in 21-22. Schools that have incomplete data for school level free and reduced price status. The first option is that program operators may use school data provided by the state agency from a designated month of the school year from school year 1920. To qualify as area eligible for summer 2022. The data to be used to determine area eligibility must be the most recent data available, which for this year is likely school year data from 2019-2020. The determinations made with 2019 and 2020 data will be valid for the next 2 program years. So area eligibility determinations made in summer 2022 using 2019-2020 data will be eligible to be used through summer 2024. The second option is that program operators can use a process like what schools that do the community eligibility provision, or CEP, use to qualify area eligibility for summer food service program. So without getting into the nitty-gritty here, because there's a lot of details, this option leverages the process that schools in CEP use to qualify as area eligible sites. And sites that qualify for area eligibility using this method must follow the regular program rules after 2023 and onwards. So it's limited to this year. And with that, I can transition to talking about, next slide, please. So with that, we can transition to talking about some program monitoring and operational support that we can provide. So next slide. With COVID-19 conditions continuing, FNS recognizes that some of the current program monitoring requirements and regulations still don't efficiently address the oversight of the child nutrition programs. Starting in fiscal year 21 and again in fiscal year 2022, FNS provided state agencies with the opportunity to submit a waiver request of both state and local child nutrition program monitoring requirements, and to propose an alternative plan for conducting effective program oversight. Next slide, please. For this summer, the oversight and monitoring plans can include waiving on-site monitoring requirements, which would allow site visits to be conducted off-site, or desk reviews as you might call them, or through a hybrid approach of on-site and off-site elements. These waivers of on-site visits can be for things like for the state agencies, pre-approval visits and required reviews, and for sponsors required site visits and reviews. Next slide, please. For FY22, FNS has approved 13 oversight waiver requests for state agencies for Ssfsp, which will remain in effect until September 30th, 2022. Next slide, please. Monitoring and oversight waiver requests have varied by state, but many states requested to waive on-site monitoring for both the state agency and sponsoring organizations. Some states have also requested to waive a review of food service operations at each site within the first 4 weeks of operation, and have opted to extend the review period past 4 weeks to allow more time to complete off-site monitoring. Many states chose to use the robust off-site monitoring strategies they successfully implemented last fiscal year, again for this fiscal year. Alternative oversight plans include a variety of strategies to ensure program integrity. Plans include targeted technical assistance, monthly webinar trainings, development of TA resources, virtual training events, and conferences. We highly encourage sponsors to work closely with their state agencies if they have questions about how monitoring and program oversight are being implemented in their state. Next slide, please. As we move forward together, we encourage state agencies to continue working closely with FNS to develop efficient monitoring strategies that work for their individual state while maintaining program integrity. Over the course of this public health emergency, we've collected feedback from state agencies and stakeholders, and we're considering the types of monitoring flexibilities that can be made available without the need for a waiver in the future. And I would say that everyone at FNS appreciates all the hard work that states and sponsoring organizations have put into monitoring each year. Your commitment to quality and program integrity ensures that children and adults across the nation will continue to have access to nutritious meals in their communities. So thank you very much. Next slide, please. And with that, we can go to the questions that y'all submitted.
Yes, thank you so much for that update. So some of these questions, so we had questions submitted beforehand, and those are the ones that USDA will be answering verbally on this webinar. I will collect the questions from the chat, and I can send them to USDA later if they're not able to answer them. And if they're able to answer them at a later date, they can send me answers, and we'll make sure we can circulate those around.
Yep. That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the first question we have is there a possibility for national implementation of these waivers rather than relying on individual states to implement them, ensuring access to the feeding programs regardless of external factors?
Thank you for that question. The answer is that USDA is not able to continue approving nationwide waivers, and that is because the emergency authority that granted USDA nationwide waiver authority is expiring at the end of the school year. And that waiver authority was provided to USDA by Congress, and in the latest federal budget, which passed last month, Congress didn't extend the authority. And I just want to note that it was a state choice whether or not to use the nationwide waivers, and the states again can request individual waivers through USDA's Section 12L authority for many of the same flexibilities that were formally offered through the nationwide waivers. So states have the discretion how to implement those waivers in the way that is best responsive to COVID-19 conditions locally.
Great, thank you. So the second question is, are there any restrictions for use of individual waivers during the summer? Not including specific restrictions that states may choose to require, can they be used in the same way as the nationwide waivers?
Okay, thank you. As I discussed during the webinar, states can request several flexibilities for summer 2022 operations. FNS has already released guidance for the 4 most popular waivers, those rescinded memo waivers as we call them, first week site visit, offer versus serve, meal service times, and area eligibility for closed enrolled sites for the Ssfsp and SSO. And these are the ones that we can approve through our 12L Waiver Authority. These waivers were available prior to the pandemic, and their use doesn't have to be tied to COVID-19. And many states have already requested and received approval for these 4 types. In addition, as we said, state agencies can request a statewide waiver under 12L for non-congregate and parent pickup flexibilities for 2022. And these ones, FNS expects will only be implemented by program operators when non-congregate meal service and meal service times are limited by COVID. Local operators, in collaboration with their states, are in the best position to determine, though, to what extent those waivers are needed.
Thank you so much. The third question is, will FNS put parameters on what would be COVID-19 related? Does there need to be specific criteria met for local operators to justify needing to receive and utilize the waivers?
Thank you. FNS expects that summer program operators, as I said, will only use the non-congregate and parent pickup waivers when congregate meal service is limited by the COVID-19 pandemic. Local program operators working together with their state agencies are really in the best position to determine to what extent those waivers are needed. FNS is not requiring the states to collect any specific documentation to justify the need for the waivers, but state agencies may develop their own protocols for using the waivers. To ensure that necessary information is available for reporting purposes, reporting that we have on our end, state agencies must be able to report the number of program operators that use the waiver, how the waivers impacted meal service operations at participating sites, whether the waiver resulted in improved service to children, and how the waiver reduced the quantity of paperwork necessary to administer the program.
I know that one came up a lot in the chat as well, so thank you for that.
Of course.
What are the reimbursable summer meal options for districts that do not meet area eligibility requirements to participate in SSO or Ssfsp?
Okay. Well, districts that do not meet area eligibility requirements are not able to operate open SSO and Ssfsp sites. And as we've discussed, we understand that area eligibility, the nationwide waiver, was really key to successful operations over the past few years. And like I said in the presentation, there are a couple options that program operators can use to help determine if a site is area eligibility, if the site is area eligible so that it can be an open site. And FNS will share more guidance on those options as soon as we're able. But also as a reminder, closed enrolled sites can be a good option if you have areas where there's like pockets of poverty or low-income children traveling to a site during the daytime in a non-area eligible community. Closed enrolled sites can establish eligibility through collecting individual applications from the children enrolled in the site, or requesting a list from the schools of who is free and reduced price eligible. So if you want more information about operating a closed enrolled site, you can check our Ssfsp program administration guide.
Next question, will we be reimbursed at a higher rate since the cost of food has gotten so high? How are you going to help the schools through the transition since everyone is so used to no paperwork and not paying for school meals?
That's a good question. We know that program operators are really facing extraordinary challenges. It's extraordinary times, and additional funds were made available in the past, and they really helped offset a lot of the losses that folks incurred earlier in the pandemic. And we know that many people have sought ongoing support for ongoing needs. And although there is no new source of funding available now, we do expect to see a rising cost of living be reflected in the Consumer Price Index, which is what we use to make adjustments to the reimbursement rates for NSLP and SSO. And those rates announcements, the adjustments will be announced in July. And also just would like to point out that the Ssfsp reimbursement rates did go up slightly in January of this year in response to increases in the Consumer Price Index. But looking ahead, we're going to continue to examine any additional authorities we have to try to find flexibilities and tools that we have to help on this front.
Very much appreciated. So question 6 is, I am concerned about the expiration of waiver number 93, which helped daycare homes participating in CACFP that don't otherwise qualify to receive the higher Tier 1 reimbursement, which is important at a time that food is increasing in costs.
Thank you. And we've heard this concern. Unfortunately, the nationwide waiver authority that was provided for us to do this ends on June 30th, and USDA just doesn't have the legal authority to provide waivers that would increase the cost of the program to the federal government. So this means that CACFP family child care home providers will need to return to regular tiering requirements after June 30th. And any further changes to the tiering requirements would have to come through an act of Congress. On a brighter note, though, we do expect to see the rising cost of living reflected in the Consumer Price Index, which, as I said a minute ago, is what we use to make adjustments to the rates for CACFP, and that will be announced in July.
One more question, and then we will move on with the presentation. This one is there a deadline for states to sign on to / adopt a summer waiver, including the waivers that were rescinded?
The good news here is that there's no deadline to request these waivers. Usually, FNS encourages state agencies to submit their waiver requests as soon as possible, and ideally 60 calendar days prior to the anticipated implementation date, which allows us time to process them. Although saying this, I do recognize that for summer 2022, that may not be possible. But going with this as a reminder, state agencies should not implement waivers until they're approved. Retroactive waiver approval is not available. So again, we encourage the state agencies to submit their waivers as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. We really appreciate USDA being on. As I said before, if there are questions that we did not get for USDA in the chat, I will pull those out and send them to the folks at USDA, and they will try to answer as many as they can and get them back to me, and we will circulate those as part of our follow-up to this session. Again, thank you so much, Anne.
Yep, thank you, Kelsey, and thank you everyone joining the call today. We appreciate you and all the hard work you do to make sure that the children are getting fed and getting the nutrition they need. So thank you.
Thank you. If we go on to the next slide, I am now pleased to introduce Walter Campbell, Executive Director of Nutrition Services at Charleston County School District, to talk a little bit about their plans for this coming summer.
Good afternoon. As she said, my name is Walter Campbell. I'm with Charleston County School District in Charleston, South Carolina. And when I started thinking about what I was going to say today, the first thing that came to mind is that if your leadership plan this summer is similar to your pre-pandemic leadership plan, you may have a bad plan. Because I look at it, we're not leading after a crisis, we're leading out of a crisis. Somebody's calling us a crisis the last 2 years. So you may be saying, without these waivers, I'm not going to be able to reach as many children as I reached last summer. But how many kids can we reach? So I looked at our district, and pre-pandemic, we had about 22,000, 24,000 students that actually qualified for free and reduced price meals. And during the summer, we were serving about 5,000 of those students that actually qualified for free and reduced price meals. So that's around 20%. But then I looked at the data pre-pandemic nationwide, and in July, that summer, July 2018, as a nation, we were only serving 14.1% of our students that actually qualify for summer meals during the summer. And the highest I could find was 2014, which is 16.2%. So think of all the students we're not reaching. So our goal and our plan ultimately is how can we reach those, in some cases, 80 to 85% of the kids we haven't been reaching. My point is waivers or no waivers, there's a lot of kids that we can reach out to. We start our plan in January. And in our district, if our budget is not balanced just for the summer, if we're not balanced financially for the summer, we can't run the program. So we make sure we have a strict balanced budget during the summer, everything from what the price of items are. And yes, prices have jumped from one week to the next. So we build that in. You know, our milk just went up 6 cents. So you build that in because you have to have a balanced budget. Now, we want to reach as many families in the communities we can reach, but also during the summer, we feel like this is an opportunity for our folks that do want to work the summer to balance their budget. So there's plenty of jobs that we can give them during the summer. Again, we start by putting the budget together in January. In February, we have a Google sheet, a sign-up sheet that we send out to all previous sites. And then we blast the entire district to hopefully pick up some additional sites. And on that Google sheet is a form they can just fill out. We qualify the school or qualify the site based on either the school they're by or the area so we can bring them onto the program. You know, when you start a program, you are going to need to decide if you want to be self-op and run everything yourself, or maybe you're going to vend to someone else that maybe has Ssfsp. We van to the city of Charleston, the city of North Charleston, to their sites, and they actually apply for all their reimbursements. But then we also have all of our own sites. I'm not going to get in this part, but I do want to mention that we're actually going to use SSO the entire summer. So pre-pandemic, we would have about 130 to 160 schools, playgrounds, churches. And at one point over 6 years ago, we were actually on the road every day delivering to all these sites. And the issues that we ran into were maybe somebody's not there when we go to drop off the meals. So we changed to everybody has to pick up. And at first, folks didn't want to jump on board, but they all jumped on board. And we covered 1,300 square miles in the Charleston area. So we opened up 10 sites that they could go to. We also set up Zoom training, so they didn't have to drive in. So we train them on the proper handling of food, the train them on HACCP, DEC regulations, and of course, proper accountability. We use these Google forms for everything from applying for the program to training materials and tally sheets. Now, of course, we still want to reach as many students as we possibly can. And one way we do that is we do have vans that we still go out. So yes, we have the sites that come to us to pick up, but we still go out into the community. We have a great partnership with our local libraries. So we have 2 vans that go out and they stop at each library site for extended period of time, and then they serve meals at the libraries. So see if you can create a partnership with your libraries. And maybe you're going to start with one library this summer. We also want to still get out into our neighborhoods. This is when you need to look at the math. Now, I'm sure you're out there going, how logistically, with the price of gas and the price I have to pay my team, am I going to make this happen? Well, work out the math. And maybe you only start with a small pilot program. I'll tell you, one of the programs we have one van that we can take the seats out and remove them. So it can carry at least 4 people in there in this van with all of the food we need to put in there and the milk and everything. So we establish a route. There's one route we have. It'll go to 4 different sites, and it'll drop off one of our staff members at the first site with the meals, then go to the second site and the third site, and the driver at the 4th site serves the meals, continues that process, and then turns back around and picks everybody up. And mathematically, from a financial standpoint, that works for us, and we reach a lot of kids. Those particular 4 sites that I'm talking about, they're mobile home parks. They all seem to be lined up on the same road. You know, it only takes a minute for us to do this. So it's another viable option. You know, once you've established your sites, you need to decide how many kitchens you're going to open up. Like I said, we covered 1,300 square miles. So we need at least 10 kitchens open to make this happen. But what we do is we partner with our school district and say, where are you going to open up your summer school sites? And so sometimes they'll move their summer school sites to where we're going to open up our meal sites. Or we'll do the reverse. We might move meal sites where they open summer school sites. Better use of your labor. And don't forget, one thing that we're looking at this summer is how do we reach the high school students? It's a population that we really miss during the summers of high school students. So we're looking at opening up after 12, 1 o'clock programs who can reach those kids. You may be asking, how do we keep all these hot meals hot? Because we serve hot meals. And you might not serve hot meals. You might decide you're going to do shelf stable. Well, we invested in these Campbell units, or single pan Campbell units, probably 10 years ago. We're using the same Campbell units we used before. I'm not endorsing Campbell, but you can find something similar to that. It'll keep the hot meals hot for hours. And what happens is the sites come to one of our schools, they pick up their Campbells, their hot meals, everything that goes with them from hairnets to utensils. They pick all that up. The next morning they come back. If they don't bring their Campbells back, they can't pick up their next meal. So, and they've got it down pat. But on Friday, we do send out a shelf stable type meal, so our Campbells aren't sitting in a kitchen over the weekend. So you might have a hybrid, or you might just do all shelf stable items. I haven't even really discussed menu yet, and we'll get there in a second, but let's discuss transportation and how we pick some of these sites. We actually use our transportation department to find out where the most kids are, and that's how we found these 4 trailer park areas that had hundreds of kids in those areas. If you're going to go into the community, you really need to ask permission first before you set up in the community. You also use your area eligibility map to find sites, but make sure you ask permission. Or if you're going to go to a big apartment complex, ask permission. So let's hit on the menu. So with all the supply chain issues, this is my recommendation. Again, districts that are out there or food banks, you're not in competition with each other. Call each other up and partner with another district and say, hey, let's come up with the same menu. You increase your buying power. Then go to your distributor and say, hey, what can we get this summer? And they're really big on bringing in truckloads. So what we've done is we built truckloads to go to their warehouse, and they're much happier with us. And by working with other organizations, like even your local food bank, you can build those truckloads. We did this during the school year. We did it with the truckloads of chicken that we were able to force the manufacturer to ship to the distributor, and we got it what we needed. Now, you may be fortunate enough to have refrigerated warehouse. And if you are, that's lucky. You can get direct ship from the manufacturer. Normally, it's about 4 pallets worth. And if you don't have refrigeration and you go with meal kits, they're shelf stable, maybe you ship those meal kits. And we had done that in the past for our meal kits, especially during the pandemic. We just have them shipped right here. But remember, if you use the meal kit that has everything in it, even the little utensils, and it's shelf stable, you need to adjust your labor to make yourself balance. And one more note on supply chain issues. When you go to talk to your manufacturer or your distributor, make sure you have usage numbers ready, and make sure that the product that you bring in the summer, you can possibly use in the school year, because I don't want to leave our distributor stuck with a product that we asked them to bring in. So we always stay ahead of the game. Whatever meals that you serve your kids, whether it's from scratch or you get pre-made packaged meals, test it with your kids ahead of time. So we're testing items with our kids right now, or we've already tested with our kids, because I don't know who said this quote, but it's not nutrition if your kids aren't going to eat it. So please test it with your kids. I have a little more information, but I'm going to pass it on to the other folks. If anybody needs any information on labor, please let me know. We have 400 employees. Right now, we are short about 22 employees. So what we're doing is working. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Walter. That was a lot of awesome information. I'm going to turn it over to Devin Schroeder to speak from an advocate's perspective on planning for summer.
Hi everyone, my name is Devin Schroeder and I serve as the Senior Manager of Programs for Hunger Free Oklahoma. We like to call it HFO. Hunger Free Oklahoma is an intermediary organization that really centers this work on collaboration to alleviate food insecurity and hunger in Oklahoma. So we kind of have that rotating wheel that you can see on the screen, but collaboration is at the heart of everything we do. If you're not aware, Oklahoma consistently ranks at the very bottom for participation in summer meals. We're traditionally 51st in the nation. And so as long as Hunger Free Oklahoma has been around, which is about 5 years, it has really been the priority for our team to work with partners across the state to increase access, to increase awareness, and to increase participation in summer meals. So for context, it's probably about 5 or 6 students are eligible for free and reduced lunches. Only 5 of those out of 100 are accessing summer meals in Oklahoma every year. And so we've been working to move the needle through the collaboration of statewide partners, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of what that looks like. So we move this work forward in a variety of different ways, and we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. One of these ways is through the Oklahoma Childhood Food Security Coalition. It's about 5 years old as well. And on this coalition, we have a variety of different organizations. We have our state agency, which is the Oklahoma State Department of Education. We have tribal governments. We have our 2 food banks here in Oklahoma. We have sponsors like Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs. We have libraries. We have a variety of different networks that are attending our meetings every month, and we kind of come together to work on our policy agenda. We have action groups that are focusing on policy. We have a program provider action group, which is really that space for those sponsors and sites to communicate with one another, to build those relationships, to figure out what are those common challenges and barriers, to figure out how we can strategize and work to advocate for policies that are more user-friendly. And then our last action group is our outreach and resource group. And that is really working to really broaden our network across the state and bring in more partners to the coalition. So that monthly time together has been really pivotal in how we build that network of people and partners and organizations and agencies working on summer meals. So there's a lot of momentum, but summer meals can be a difficult program to navigate, especially in a rural state like Oklahoma. So when you have that child congregate requirement, we are all doing our best to figure out how we can get those kids to the meals or the meals to the kids within the program requirements. But the waivers really illustrated how much more we can do when we have that flexibility. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. One of the ways that we work as a coalition to really help get the word out about summer meals, to increase that awareness, is we convene a summer meals kickoff. In 2019 and 2020, we had an in-person program. We took the year off for 2021, and then we have just launched a virtual series this spring that went from January to this month. We just had our last session this morning, and we had a whole bunch of different programming involved in how to figure out how to move forward with summer meals. We were kind of operating in this dual world of what if we can get the waivers extended? They've been pivotal to how we are accessing summer meals for our kids and increasing that number of meals that are served, and also operating that maybe the waivers aren't going to be extended. So we need to prepare for being in person. So we've had a lot of different programming to kind of share with our partners. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to highlight, this is a slide that we shared during our January session. This was the launch of our 2022 Summer Meals series. And so as you can see on that sheet, we had about, with Seamless Summer and Summer Food Service Program, just over 20 million meals served. In other states, that may not seem like too big of a deal, but I want to give you a bit of the context. In Oklahoma, in 2019, prior to the pandemic, we had served about 1.69 meals. So if you think about that jump from 2019 to 2021, that is incredible. The need has always been there. It's just that we had more flexible, more opportunities to really kind of get those meals to the kids. And so we heard time and time again from our sponsors and our sites how incredible those waivers were in allowing them to meet the kids where they were. And so another illustration I'd like to make is, as you can see for 2021, We had about 1,087 summer food service sites and then 232 seamless summer sites. In comparison, for 2019, we had about 749 sites total. So again, a big jump. Oklahomans are passionate about taking care of the kids in our state. The waivers just really illustrated what we can do when we have the opportunity to be more flexible. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. I'm going to go ahead and share just a little bit about what our summer meal kickoff sessions look like this spring. So as I mentioned before, we had a dual purpose. On one hand, we were trying to really keep our partners informed of what it looked like at the national level as far as waivers. What were our lawmakers doing? What was the decision making happening at the national level? Keeping them informed during these coalition meetings and kickoff sessions, and then at the same time figuring out what that path forward looks like if we are going to be in person. So as you can see, in January, we did that highlight. We sponsored, shared the sponsor stories, so many different successes. We heard from our child nutrition director at our state agency at OSDE, and then we just did a lot of celebrations. In February, we kind of dove right in. We talked about those advocacy opportunities, how our partners could share their stories and how those nutrition waivers impacted their operations. We also went deep into the application process for the Summer Food Service Program sponsor. As you all know, it's a little bit intense, and so we wanted to break it down for organizations that are interested in summer meals but may not have kind of taken that initial dive. And so how can we make that process more approachable and user friendly? And then we also talked about engaging volunteers. We talked about AmeriCorps, Vistas, ways that they can help support the programs, 4-H, extension volunteers, etc. So we really wanted to beef up how our sites are being able to staff, because as you all know, staffing has been a huge challenge for all kinds of different operators. In March, this last month, we had a panel on community engagement. So we had sponsors and sites talking about how they built partnerships within their own communities to increase awareness, participation, to bring in programming to their sites. And it was a great conversation, a lot of different takeaways. And then this morning, we talked about the importance of, as we go back to those in-person congregate feeding sites, what does it look like to reintroduce activities and programming and enriching activities, and that sense of welcoming and connection that kids want when they come to the summer meal site, and helps to foster that connection. And we also address the messaging that we need to get out to parents. They're so used to picking up meals for multiple days, maybe getting meals delivered to them. What is it going to look like for summer 22 when things are drastically different? So we talked a lot about that in this April session. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Hunger Free Oklahoma's ongoing advocacy opportunities or priorities. So throughout this spring, one of those priorities has really been to kind of just keep leveraging that collaboration in our work. In our monthly coalition meetings and our kickoff connections, just really kind of sharing the latest information, and then also hearing from our partners what their biggest needs are, their biggest concerns are. In February, we coordinated a sign-on letter to send to our Oklahoma delegation, and we've been gathering stories in that process. What are those impacts on the nutrition waivers and how they affected our program providers? And so we have so much data to support the waivers and so many stories to support the waivers. It's incredible when you really look at it, and just giving that opportunity for our congressional decision makers to come to the sites and just to see those kids that are able to access these meals in rural Oklahoma, where, you know, in a traditional model, that's just not possible. They're not able to get to the site that's 20 miles away. Their parents may not be able to afford that gas to get one meal versus going to go to a site to get 20 meals at a time. So we've been keeping our partners informed. This past month, in earlier April, we sent another letter to our congressional delegation with additional stories from our partners. And then on an ongoing basis, as we hear about these USDA waiver opportunities, we're working with our state agency to figure out how we can apply for these waivers and then explore summer PEBT. So our child nutrition director, our OSD, joined the call today. Really excited about the momentum that we have there. So many partners are passionate about this work and figuring out how we can make it work within these program requirements. Moving forward, we are continuing to engage media, local newspaper stories, television, just to highlight the importance of these waivers. So really matching the data with the stories. We'll go ahead and move forward. I'm going to go show you just a little bit real quick, just a couple of the impact stories that we did hear from some statewide partners in Oklahoma. Operating a Ssfsp without waiver flexibilities will create a cliff for rural children primarily fed through the school nutrition programs. Not being able to deliver to rural areas will be devastating for these children. And once again, our rural Oklahoma children will come in last. The other one, the number of sites participating in the program is drastically increasing. And in turn, so will the number of children served. With gas prices on the rise, families will not have the means to travel to sites for one meal per day. And we're hearing a lot of those stories from one of our really big sponsors. They have hundreds of sites, and what they're hearing is that due to staff shortages, due to burnout, due to illness, a lot of these sites that were able to operate during COVID are just not able to go back to that in-person model. And so they've lost a lot of sites, and so they're trying to figure out how they can reach others to kind of fill that gap. You go ahead and go to the next slide. Yes.
Sorry, Devin. Don't mean to interrupt, but we do need to move on to the next speaker.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Kind of go through your last.
Yeah, I apologize. I get passionate about this. So just to wrap up,
I understand.
We are just doing some outreach opportunities to get those messages out to caregivers, sharing our meal mapping website where parents can find their nearest meal site, and coordinating earned media strategies and getting the word out through paid advertising. So that is our work in a nutshell. I will go ahead and just go to the next slide, share some of our outreach material. And my contact information is on the next slide. Would love to connect with others. So I'll go ahead and let you all move forward.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
We really jam-packed this agenda today. So we are going to move on to our final speaker. Azad, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's great to be with our national partners in this presentation. Again, my name is Osaid Perry Monteroso, and I'm a program manager for the expansion of the Summer Meals program in Rhode Island. I am a consultant for the Department of Education. See, we can move on into the next slide. There is so much to cover in so little amount of time. So in 2013, and as we develop the presentation for this afternoon, in 2013, we started identifying strategies of how to improve our visibility of the program. And we were working towards moving on to create a statewide campaign that unify all our cities and towns. And we developed that in so many different ways that it became very successful. As in preparation to 2020, without knowing it, we had established work with local schools across our districts to create alternative breakfast options and innovative ideas for food access. And when the pandemic hit, we already have put in place so many game changer strategies that our food managers in every district work amazingly to make sure that children across the state had access to food. The waivers definitely help us so that we could go places that otherwise we could have never made eligible. And we used the time to do one-on-one surveys. We had over 500 individual surveys, and I think it was 122 key informant interviews, because we wanted to know which was the best way in which we can reach out families, individuals, caretakers to bring their children through our meal sites. I know that in the last presentation they were talking about like the 9.1 million and that the number might seem small. Look at our numbers. Like in a usual summer, we serve in 2018 around 470,000 meals. In 2020, we were at 2.9 million served during the summer. That for me was a dream come true. So the pandemic, regardless of how horrible it has been, it gave us opportunity to tap into other resources and to look at our reality from a different lens. It also helps us come closer to our parents and caretakers. And one thing that we discover is that using different outlets of social media can truly bring people together. We explore everything from, your Facebook, your Instagram, your Snapchat, but also using WhatsApp friends groups that will pass information from one to another. That was key for us to keep family informed. And that reflected also in 2021, as we are going to see it in the next slide. So in 2021, we had this great goal, right? We wanted to make sure that we secure it through our survey that I mentioned in 2020. We discovered that more than 50% of families coming to a summer meal site were new to the program. And I have been working in this program to generate outreach and visibility since 2013. So knowing that there was still more opportunities, this was great. So the goal was to secure those additional 50% of families that have participated in 2020. And we actually had 65% of families. So the 50% retained plus additionally 15% more that were brought to summer meal sites. And we compared the numbers from our traditional summer in 2019 to the one in 2021. And it truly made a difference to be able to use 2020 as a baseline year where we went out there. We came closer to the community and gathered information. If we could go please to the next slide. So for us, outreach and community engagement comes in different shapes and colors. We can move to the next slide while I'm talking. So we have created this concept of the common denominator. We have partners that come and help us promote our message, that they are national, regional, statewide, and community level partners. There is over 2,000 nonprofit organizations in the state of Rhode Island, and almost every single one of them, including all the state departments that have any contact with the community, are engaged in our program. We use every single outlet of communication to disseminate information about the summer meals. So something that we do, and I apologize that I'm talking so fast, but I know time is so precious. I want to share as much as I can. So we don't ask partners to reinvent the wheel, but we ask them what it is that you already have that could help us promote the program. So if it is an e-newsletter, if it is a flyer that you send, if it is, a podcast where you can talk about the program, whatever it is that you already have, we want it for Summer Meals Awareness. And that is why every summer there are 500,000 plus newsletters that go out through every single different organization that you can imagine, from healthcare to community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, youth organizations serving children and youth. Like, regardless of who they are serving an individual, a family. And I think that there is where sometimes there is so much disconnection, because we try to only engage communities or organizations that only work with youth and children. But regardless of what type of organization we have, if they work with people, they are working with someone we need to know about summer meals. Something we did also was, for a few years, we have been hearing that our older adults that become grandparents become also those caretakers for the summer while their children work. So we partner with Meals on Wheels. So every time that a meal was being delivered, a flyer was given. So grandparents could find information about closest meal site where the grandkids can receive a free meal. We partner with United Way 211 in our state, and they are our brain of operations. They have a living list of all the summer meal sites that we have. So if you call and you say, I live on Broad Street, what is the closest summer meal site to my home? They will actually be able to give you options, including the time that the meals are served, which is great. So here we're talking about communication strategies. In our state, we were able to, one, develop those partnerships. We think that definitely for a successful expansion, we need to train our staff, regardless of how much time we invest in marketing, community outreach, partnership recruitment, if that frontline staff giving that bag of a meal to a child is not greeting them with love and welcoming smile, that family is not coming back to that site. Therefore, we are losing a family that could actually take advantage of this free resource. We work with food pantries, with libraries, anything and everything that you can imagine that exists in a state is engaged in our state. So that would be the easy way to put it out there. Communication strategies, we use all gain media that we can use, and we also pay for media advertising. So we paid for a portion for our bus campaign. They donate X amount of months to be on in X amount of buses, electronic ads, you name it. So the Rhode Island Department of Education have invested also in paying for the marketing campaign for each one of our sponsors. When we created our unified campaign, we created all elements that could bring visibility to a summer meal site. And that includes, before when we did our survey in 2013, nobody knew what was in the cooler in the middle of the park. There was no signs that say, hey, summer meals are here, come and eat. On the contrary, people felt that it was a very stigmatized program. So in our state, for communication purposes, we have removed the words the poor and the needy out of any kind of communication related to the summer meals program. We don't use that in any media, in any kickoff event, in any spike event. Government official knows it, and everybody that is invited to any of these events know that they cannot use the terminology that will stigmatize a program that has been created to unify our community and bring more children closer to food access. Tell me, I'm already on the line. Time is up. Do I have a few minutes, or I'm all set?
So if you can wrap up in the next
Sure.
minute or so, that'd be great. Sorry, we are over time right now.
That's perfectly fine. If we can go to the next slide. If let me see. So I can talk about this when we go to the next slide, and it's about the elements for marketing that you use about your program. This is a sample of our statewide campaign. So where do you put these materials will bring the visibility of the program in the way that you want. So from feather flags to banners to lawn signs, whatever it is that you are creating, it has to be everywhere that is visible to families. Can we go to the next slide, please? And yes, we partner with all kinds of organizations that bring children activities to the site. So when we create celebrations for children, it's partner communities, partners that bring all kinds of activities that bring the community together. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is an invitation. I talked to you about the common denominator before. So think about who are your partners that can support all your efforts on summer meals expansion, and you will be surprised. Just thinking out of the box, not only food-related organizations, not only children and youth, but every single institution that interact with an individual at the local and state level can become a potential partner of this program. Next, please. And thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to be with you today.
So thank you all so much. Stephen, if you could go to the next slide. I just really quickly want to plug our upcoming webinars. We have 2 CEP webinars coming up, one on May 5th and one on May 19th. And on May 12th, we are actually partnering with the Coalition on Human Needs and Partnership for America's Children to do a webinar on leveraging School Now to Time school meal programs to connect families to the child tax credit. So that's a really interesting webinar that we have coming up that we really hope you are able to make it to. Like I said before, everything will be sent out afterwards, a recording, as well as the slides themselves. And if you need contact information for any of the speakers, feel free to email me at kboone@frac.org. And if you have any questions, please email them to me there as well. Thank you to all of our speakers. This was an amazing session. Apologies that things were really rushed. We tried to cram a lot in an hour, but thank you guys for sticking around after the allotted time. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful day.